know the word seculosity, but you've definitely experienced it. Let's talk with David Zahl on Steve Brown, etc.
He's an old white guy, an author, broadcaster, and seminary professor who's sick of religion. And he's brought friends. Please welcome Steve Brown, etc.
We are so glad you're here. I'm Steve, the old white guy. Our resident megachurch pastor, Zach Van Dyke, is here now. I don't want to say Zach has a lot of kids, but the Catholics and Mormons are both trying to recruit him.
That's good.
Top prospect.
That's good.
Eric Guzman is with us, and it's his birthday this week. In his wisdom, Eric has started getting rid of things he doesn't need anymore, like hopes and dreams and optimism and to be a bestseller and stuff.
Yeah, that is so accurate. Kudos to your new writer.
Ballast. It's all ballast.
And Matthew Porter is here. Matthew reminds me of that poem by Robert Frost. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I went back home and took a nap.
And that has made all the difference.
Our producer, Jinx, is hard at work in the little glass booth. He pushes the button. Can you push all sorts of Jinx? He pushes the buttons to make me sound screwed up.
That was his fault.
Yeah.
He pushed the wrong button.
What would God sound like as a girl?
And Kathy is, of course, the soft feminine side of the program. Had she been given the loaves and fishes, only a few people would have eaten, but they would have enjoyed the best breadcrumb tilapia this side of the Jordan River.
What happened to you this weekend? Were you like, oh my goodness? Are you sure you're reading correct? Well, you did have your eyes dilated this morning,
man,
so
I can't.
he's probably reading it incorrectly.
I can.
We'll just say that.
And I've looked forward to this time. I'll tell you, I like David Zahl anyway, and this book, what I could read of it, it kept blurring on me as I was reading, was one of those books that you know, I hate the word woke. I mean, I just hate that word, and I hate people that use it. But as I was reading this book, I couldn't find a better word. All of a sudden, I said, that's it. You know, he's got it. I see things different because of just the bit I read this morning. The book is Seculosity, and I hope he made it up, and I don't even know if I'm pronouncing it right, but the subtitle will be helpful: how career, parenting, technology, food, politics, and romance became our new religion, and what to do about it. David is the founder and director of Mockingbird Ministries, the editor-in-chief of the popular Mockingbird website, and co-host of the Mockingcast. He also serves, he's quite religious, on the staff of Christ Episcopal Church. His latest book, Seculosity.
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 Yeah, there's no.
I want to say seculosity, and you
Yeah,
can't do
but
that.
No, there's no R in there.
But you could write a book and make
Make it work.
Yeah, you
That's
use that
true.
word.
I mean, as long as we're making up words, why not?
Yeah, you're free.
There's
Make
no
up how you
absolutes.
pronounce them. David, are you still with us?
I am right here, raring to go. I'm thrilled to be here.
Listen, I was not blowing smoke when I said this book is going to be a game changer.
Well, he was blowing smoke, but it was because of his pipe.
Yeah, it wasn't. It wasn't the other kind.
Oh, well, thank you, Steve. That means more than I could possibly say. You are the Jedi Master, as I refer to you.
Do you define the word, even if I can't pronounce? What does that mean?
Sure. Seculosity is simply, it's a combination of the word secular and the word religiosity, and it refers specifically to religious impulse, devotion, feeling, sentiment that is directed at earthly rather than heavenly objects. So, I didn't want to say that, I didn't want to call it secular religiosity because I think there's something a little different when you sort of completely take God out of the equation. But, it's a way to describe kind of why we're all so anxious and upset at each other because it feels like we're actually super religious about way too many things.
You know, I have often suspected that there was a self-righteousness built into human nature. And, you know, you see it a lot, and this is the field where I play in religion. And, you know, the whole Pharisaical, legalistic, self-righteous kind of thing that is so condemning. And, you know, and I have spoken about that and tried to define it and gone after it and cussed over it for a long time. But every time I move out of my little box into, I started to say the real world, but the unreal world, I'm finding exactly the same thing. It smells the way it does in the church. It looks that way. It feels that way. And it's a kind of fundamentalism that is pretty scary. Define the difference, David, between religion, you say, with a capital R, and the kind of religious thing that you're talking about here, too.
Sure. Well, capital R religion is how we usually use that word, which is, just refers to Christianity or Judaism or Islam or something like that. But small r religion, this is a distinction I'm trying to make in the book, is simply whatever the justifying story of your life is. So it's whatever it is you, me, anyone is looking to for meaning, value, purpose, community, salvation, what I would call enoughness, but religious people just call righteousness. One of the definitions in there that I borrowed from a friend is your religion, small r, is simply your preferred guilt management system.
That's so good. You said you and I agree, maybe not on the word woke, but on the word worldview. I wince every time I hear it, but it is sort of a worldview kind of thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think like your religion is more than just like your sort of paradigm or your filter. I think religion is it operates upon you as much as you sort of operate upon it. Like it's not even conscious a lot of times. And I think one of the things I'm exploring in Seculosity is how when these dynamics are unconscious, when we're sort of we're trying to wrench our enoughness out of our relationship with food or politics or parenting, that when it's unconscious, it can be almost more damaging. Like we're not quite aware of just how fanatical we're coming across and how judgmental and how even damning we're acting towards people who maybe worship or who are sort of signed on to a slightly different form of religion.
That does explain things to me, and I really began to see this is a game changer for me, and I've only gotten a little bit into your book, and I had 1,000 things to do this morning, and I kept coming back to the book because I couldn't get away from it. And Matt, who writes the scripts for this, Matthew, had exactly the same experience, man. We really like since you're coining words, what is enoughness?
Well, enoughness is, I would say, it's what Christians usually mean when they use the word righteousness. Enoughness is, that just as much as we have a drive to feel loved or to feel validated or to feel, satisfied, or that you and I, human beings, sort of at their core, there's something that's animate. We want to feel like we're enough. And so you hear that word enough. Whenever people are talking about the anxiety and loneliness and division today, you always hear about people who are striving to be wealthy enough and thin enough and woke enough, Steve, and, charitable enough, holy enough, good enough. And so I think that was really my work of translation. It's not quite the same thing as righteousness, because righteousness is as we understand it, is sort of defined by God.
Yeah.
But enoughness, I think, is you use that word and people, it's like a lightning rod. They're like, oh, yes, I don't feel like I'm enough, and I'm constantly, afraid that my kids aren't enough. I'm afraid that my bank account, that balance isn't enough. I'm afraid that the person who I love isn't enough, or that they don't reflect well enough on me. So I always think enough usually betrays some sort of standard of enoughness. Like, you can't use, the word doesn't really make sense unless it's referencing some theoretical, vanguard of enoughness. So that's what it means to me.
Hey guys, if what David said kind of clicks with you and you say, that's me, we're not only going to define the problem, David's going to tell us what to do about it. And I'm looking forward to that too. I'm not speaking as an outsider of the human race, and you're not either. So we've got some answers for you, as well as some questions. Don't touch that dial. Like Jesus, we're coming back. Hanging out with Steve Brown, etc., and our guest is David Zahl. And by the way, you ought to write this down, mbird.com. You ought to check that out. It'll blow you away.
Yeah, I love everything you're saying. I was wondering if you could kind of, David, dive into a little bit of kind of the categories that you laid out. I think we kind of wrap our brain around how we could get so into politics that we kind of can't see the borders, anymore, and how we just kind of descend into dogma. But you have stuff like parenting. It's like, how could we be too far into parenting? Isn't that a positive thing?
Well, everything I talk about in the book is actually a positive thing. I mean, I don't think. Politics is nothing. They're necessary. Food, you got to eat it to live. Parenting is a tricky one because so much of our parenting is really done for with so much love and desire to protect a person. But we just saw this college admissions scandal in the country go on where parents in L.A. were paying exorbitant amounts of money to get their kids, or to sneak their kids through the back door of these universities. And the sense is which when people are committing felonies to get this acceptance letter, that there's, I would call it a judgment of religious significance, in that it's not just your child's opportunities or future at stake, it's yours as well as a parent. Like most parents I know, I remember this wonderful pie chart, and it's like from a dad that said, why do I put my kids' hat and gloves on my kids in the morning? And it said like 10% so there's warm on the walk between the car and school, 5% so they don't catch a cold, and 85% so I don't get judged by other parents. And this sort of competitive righteousness that goes on between parents, especially when that sells books and every week, it seems like, especially for women, there's a new way to learn how you're parenting wrong. And to be a good parent isn't just to be good at raising a child; it's to be a good person. That's what it actually means today. And so I talk about that. I think that ends up objectifying your child, and they become a tool in your own self-justification tool belt. I think it's impossible almost not to do it, but our children are not just extensions of us. They're human beings. They're God's children, I think. But there's a real oppressive spirit around modern parenting that most parents I know of, because I got little kids, they don't feel like they can really absent themselves. They don't really say that they can opt out of the game because they don't want their children to suffer. But it feels like you're in church and people getting called out for being heretical when it comes to parenting and cast out. And communities form around common parenting strategies. It feels to me, as someone who's grown up in the church, it feels very religious, but without any of the grace.
You know, your statement that we're seldom not in church was so profound it blew me away. I mean, it was the magnifying glass that all of a sudden turned on parenting and money and sex and politics. It was profound.
Well, tell me what you mean by that, Dave.
Well, I'm trying to avoid the language of idolatry in the book because I think, at least in the things I profile, we're not worshiping parenting, or we're not worshiping food, or we're not worshiping romance. We're worshiping the enoughness, that we're the righteousness. We're in those things for the righteousness that we think they can give us. So that means they operate religiously, in that we're told how to. When I say you're in church all the time, it's like you're surrounded by people and you're being told to be better and to sort of work harder and to pull yourself up on your bootstraps, and that you will be accepted if you do such and such and such. Now, we might say that that's bad religion or that's merciless religion. It's just religion of law. But to the amount of anxiety that surrounds something like our work lives today, I think betrays the sense that there's something more than just the earning of money or the, producing goods going on, that we're actually producing identity and righteousness. And that's why that's very similar to what it can feel like to be in a bad church. And by that I mean a sort of oppressively legalistic, constantly proving your righteousness to God. But these things, as part of it is as we sort of retreat from a common religion, capital R, we're just finding more and more things to fill that space. And come to find out, it's they're not doing that good of a job. At least not if the mental health measurements in our country are any indication.
David, talking about that, a common phrase that you hear in politics is looking at one side or the other and using the phrase virtue signaling. Oh, you're doing that to help me understand how woke you are or how, whatever you are. It's more of a posture versus something that you believe that person really holds. But the more you're talking, I'm like, oh, shoot, I think we're all in that. Maybe it's not virtue signaling. Maybe it's parental status signaling, or I'm going to even something as silly as like the idea of like working late. What is that? Are you really getting stuff done, or are you helping kind of spread the word this cat's a hard worker? It's just so much posturing. It's just kind of exhausting.
I mean, the biblical term there is self-justification. We're justifying ourselves through our work. The studies show, but there's no such thing as a sick day anymore. It's just working from home. And there's that great Onion article. It's like sort of progressive company allows its employees to work from home after the hours of 9 to 5. And this sort of compulsion to keep working, to never stop trying to assuage that inner condemnation, or never try to stop reaching that standard of enoughness. I think it can be damaging to us, not just on a corporate level, but individually. Because I write about all the things that I'm most well acquainted with as a person that may get up there and preach on Sunday, but really, I also find that I'm rooting my righteousness, my enoughness, in how good a parent I am, or in how purely I'm eating, or in the perfection that I can provide my wife in some way. And guess what? It's not a lot. But that's where I'm coming from in the book, and I think it resonates with people's low-level, ambient-level anxiety about all sorts of things that maybe we used to hold a bit more lightly.
We're coming up on a break here, but you mentioned earlier that all of these things are good. Food, you need politics, you need to work, and I'd be interested on the other side of the break to hear how we can determine if any one of these things have taken us to the place of seculosity. You know, how do we know it's become caustic, and it's not just, you know, we're functioning in these things that are necessary parts of life?
Absolutely.
That will be interesting. I mean, that's kind of the problem, isn't it?
Yeah, like you're blind to it, so
Yeah.
how do you get woke?
That's right. and you get woke.
So that I can signal that I'm woke.
Self-justified,
Yeah,
right.
I need to figure this out so that I can feel good about myself.
I need a bumper sticker somewhere.
You guys don't want to miss a bit of this. We've got to make a buck, and this is hard work. Milk and cookie time, and then we shall return. Seculosity is the title of the book. How career, parenting, technology, food, politics, romance, etc. become our new religion and what you can do about it.
Dave, before the break, I brought up how earlier in the interview you said that all these things are actually good. I mean, you need to parent your kids, you need to eat food, and, you know, all of that kind of stuff. You need a career, you need to make money. But how do you know when you've moved into this seculosity thing? Like, for example, I wrote my book, The Seed, A True Myth, that you could, Eric,
Who
if
had
you'd
35
like,
after the hour?
if you would like, purchase at keylife.org. I wrote that, and, you know, I mean, that was a good thing to do, you know, to get the gospel out there in the most creative way that I know how, to put everything that I know into one book and, you know, just to hopefully change the world, actually. And... You know, then I found out
Do you
that...
have a question?
Actually, I forgot what the question was. No.
Your book signaling.
So then, you know, nobody buys it, and I'm suicidal, and I'm having a midlife crisis, and I would suspect that that's a sign that, you know, I crossed over into seculosity with this book. But how about for these other losers?
Well, first of all, let me say I love that book, and I think I am one of the people who not only bought it but read it
And endorsed it. Thank you very much.
It was a thing of great beauty. It remains a thing of great beauty. The Seed, everyone, by Eric Guzman. Go for it.
Thank you very much.
I would say it's a couple things. I think that usually the one that people say, well, that's not a religion, that's too important or something like that, that probably is the one that is turned into seculosity for you. So if, like, you hear it and you'd be like, well, politics isn't a religion. This is extremely important. Or, you know, how dare you say that my relationship with exercise has become religious? You know, health is the most important thing in life. You've probably crossed into seculosity at that point. But the point of the book really isn't actually to sort of tell people how they can safeguard themselves, because unlike another one of the reasons I decided not to use the language of idolatry, although it is biblical language, is because I think sometimes almost unconsciously those books suggest that there's all these idols and we just sort of choose between them, and it's up to you to choose the right one or not to choose God. And I don't know if that is actually how it works. It feels always to me more like a Romans 7 thing. Like, I know this book shouldn't be this important to me. I know my career shouldn't matter. I shouldn't rise and fall based on how, you know, this promotion, but it happens to us anyway. And that psychological, spiritual weight just falls on us, and we're kind of crushed. And I think at that point, usually what seculosity is revealed to us in crisis. But as we believe, you know, that's God meets us there. But I don't know if that fully answers the question, Eric, but let me just reiterate my love for that book and my love for you.
That answers the question.
Yeah, Dave, he'll live on that for a month.
Yeah, he's already tagged that clip so that he can play it again and again.
Yeah, James, can we pull that, please, and put that into the instant replay, so we can just pull that up anytime I'm feeling down.
David, I haven't read the book yet, so I just started flipping through it right before the interview because I'm in prep for for the Super Bowl for pastors for Easter coming up, and and I've been working on my sermon, but where I flipped and started reading in your book, I'm thinking maybe I need to go back and rethink my Easter sermon, because I read the part where you're talking about your friend Alex, who was quitting being an elementary school teacher, and there are all these reasons why you might think he would quit, but he said that he's quitting because of the pathology of transformation that had infiltrated the profession of teaching. And as I've been working on my Easter sermon, I've been thinking a lot about what will one day be in us, and who we will one day be, and what God had in mind when he thought us up, and like calling out what's most true and beautiful. But as I was reading that, I think there's a really fine line that exposes. So I wanted to give you an opportunity just to kind of talk about what is the pathology of transformation.
Well, the pathology of transformation simply says that your enoughness, your righteousness, is completely yoked to the results that whatever it is that you're able to exhibit in your life. And I use that as a way of getting into talking about the church and the way that a lot of the sort of what passes for Christianity in America or in the West actually resembles some of these others, like secular proxies, a bit more. And one of the ways it does so is that it places undue emphasis on transformation, like measurable transformation. And so people get really anxious about, am I improving enough? Am I more patient? Am I more like Jesus? And as we know, that desire to measure yourself, to prove yourself, it turns you inward, and it kind of turns you away from God. So it's this weird self-defeating thing. And then sometimes people get burnt out on that sort of individual take, and then they move their faith. It's got to be completely about improving society. Right. And transforming society. And the book is trying to say not that God doesn't work in our lives and transform us both individually and communally, but that there's a real danger in putting the cart before the horse, and maybe not putting much trust in the fact that we will be transformed in the twinkling of an eye, one day.
David,
so that's where my hope lies.
Yep.
David Zahl sounds like this nice, kind, gentle man. He's a revolutionary, guys. And he's saying things that'll revolutionize your life. Stay with us. We'll talk with him some more on the other side of the break. We're talking with David Zahl on his book, Seculosity. I'm getting this. It just takes a while. I'm old and I'm slower than I was before. You got to get this book. This is the kind of book that could revolutionize a church and its witness and what we do in the world. It's how career, parenting, technology, food, politics, and romance became our new religion and what to do about it.
David, before you go on into something terribly deep, I had a quick question about the church. But before that, I have to ask you. You and Steve were, and a bunch of other people were together this past weekend. So we like to do due diligence and find out. Did he do okay?
Steve just rocked the house in every way that a cynical old white preacher can.
There you go.
We were just blown away and edified and enriched, and everything that he probably thinks didn't happen, but God was there. It was awesome.
Wow, that's great. Good. Well, listen, I do have a quick question about the church. You use the term Jesus land, and obviously in reference to the church as that it can be a replacement for religion. Could you kind of just expand on that a little bit?
Sure. I think that the church, there are wonderful churches and not so wonderful churches and churches that operate that way. God uses all sorts of churches. This we know. So I truly didn't want to come down too hard, while also maybe maybe kind of surfacing the tendency for the church to kind of promise to be yet another means of self-improvement, or market themselves as another solution to your own personal enoughness, or another place. Let me put it this way: another place to assert and to earn your righteousness, rather than a place to reliably receive it. I really think that church is in a culture full of seculosity, where everyone is jockeying for righteousness, and we're all competing to think, and social media ensures us that everyone thinks that they're the only one who's kind of not doing so hot. The church has this amazing message to proclaim, the gospel, which is that God loves you in spite of and in the midst of your brokenness and weakness and sin. So it makes me sad when I get the sense from people who maybe burnt out of religion, or for whom church was simply one mammoth project of proving, and where they always felt like they weren't good enough. And we as Christians believe we're good enough not because of something we've done, but because of who God is and who Jesus is. So that's a real a message that sings, not just speaks, that sings in a culture full of seculosity. But I'm not sure it always gets across.
Mm-hmm. David, something that's interesting about this book, I think it gives kind of a different way of framing conversations with non-Christians. I think back to the classic Christian film Fight Club.
My favorite, by the way.
And yes, mine too. And what do you have there except people who have gone all the way down the line for what society told them would pay off and bring them fulfillment and bring them enoughness, which is success and career and materialism. And so you see them, it's in a nihilistic kind of way. They get to the end and realize this isn't it. This isn't what I was promised. And so you have, not the answer, but certainly turning away from something that's not the answer. It feels like this idea of seculosity is a really compelling way for people to understand that there's a thirst that they're trying to satisfy in an unsuccessful way. Does it feel like that kind of on-ramp to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if the book provides that, then gosh, that would be fantastic. Praise God. The book is really like we're all in the same boat kind of idea, that right. All of us are desperate for love and for someone to tell us we're okay. And as Christians, we're just as desperate for that as anyone. And I believe that the distinction here between seculosity and true religion is that every sort of replacement religion under the sun is a religion of law, and then ultimately a religion of despair, because we know we never can quite get to the top of the ladder of whatever it is we've put at the top of the ladder. And here you have a religion of grace, or a religion of grace and law, which is Christianity, which says that God comes down the ladder to you, and that is an answer. I think that is an answer, but I also know that we're certainly all at the bottom of the ladder, or that's how we feel. And so I do think it's a way of engaging the world out of love, in love, rather than trying to escape or think that we will no longer feel these things if we just sort of close the door.
And I suspect that's what you're getting at when you get to the part of the book and what to do about it. But do you want to unpack that anymore? Like, maybe some practical things. Like, give us some steps to really get better, so that we can
self-justify.
He's not going to take the bait.
It's funny though. The number one thing, it's a bit of a bait and switch, or I put do in parentheses, because I really think all the doing is sort of the problem, and that our hope is to be found in what God has done. And I don't just, that's not just, a nice aphorism. I really think that that's true. In terms of, I have a couple of sort of descriptions of what I think that, a religion of grace, what it might look like in a culture of seculosity. But ultimately our hope is in death and resurrection. and that is what is done unto us. And I think that that's what comes across in the end. But other thing, I feel like I could have put in sort of a long riff about humor, because the truth is Seculosity, as tragic as it is in many cases, it's also quite funny when you see people, thinking that the world will begin or end based on what is the most ethical vegan source of yogurt. It's that can be kind of, we can laugh at ourselves, or which parenting strategy is going to produce the perfect child, when everyone knows that every parenting strategy produces miserable children and wonderful children and just children.
I found so much freedom in giving up on my kids. I really have. I'm like, whatever.
Well, there's humor, there's commiseration, there's sort of a real, we're all in this together, and then I think ultimately there's a reminder, a place to come to, where we come to the end of ourselves. And to the extent that seculosity and the demands and stresses of everyday life seem to be escalating for a lot of people, I also think it might be, my hope is that it's bringing us to our knees, and maybe even to our graves, in a way that we will encounter God. The God who has Easter's coming, but Good Friday comes first, as we know.
David, this hour has just flown by. Thank you for writing this book. And if you guys don't go out and buy this book, you're crazy. This will change your life, like Jesus is trying to do. David, God bless you. We rise up and call you blessed. Thanks for spending the time with us.
Thank you, guys.
Guys, we're gonna come back and tell you who we're gonna do it unto next week. So sit back, relax, but don't go anywhere, because you'll be interested in that. Great hour with David Zahl.
I love what he said about my book.
I know you did. You know, we all felt the same way David did about your book, but we're not enough.
Oh!
I have a book coming out this summer which will sell the way The Seed did. but one of the chapters.
But he's healthier about it. He's so well.
There's another book behind that.
Yeah, that's right.
Forget it.
One of the chapters in that book is called You Too, and it's about how we witness. And when we witness to others, and we're called to do that as Christians, if we don't solicit from them a you too response, then we did it wrong. This book that David wrote puts legs on that. It really does. We're all in the same boat. We really are. Self-righteousness isn't a product produced by the church. It's a product produced by Democrats and Republicans and drunks and secularists. And it's just everywhere. And the you too thing, which you pointed out, Matthew, becomes the basis of a new conversation.
Yeah.
It really does, a place of identification with them. And that, by the way, is what this is all about. The incarnation mainly was identification, where Jesus came and identified with us. And that's what he told us to go and do in the world. All right, Catherine, who's going to be here next week?
Well, next week we have a returning friend, Noel Jesse Heikkinen. He's a pastor up in Michigan, part of the Acts 20 network. And we talked to him several years back about his book, which was called Unchained. And this new one is titled Wretched Saints, Transformed by the Relentless Grace of God. We liked him before, so I'm assuming we're going to like him again.
I find that title with transformed in it a bit troubling after this broadcast.
Well, perhaps we could suggest that he read Seculosity when we get done with
I think
the
we
interview
will,
on his
and
book.
certainly change the title of his book.
There you go.
I mean, I
I'm
felt
sure he'll
guilty.
be open to that.
I'm sure he will.
Especially since it's already been published.
That's right.
Minor detail. Change the cover and title of your book.
We're going to have to get a bunch of Sharpies and add an R to David's book.
Yeah, right.
There you go.
Seculosity.
Nice.
Jinx, how much more time do we have?
I don't know.
We're killing it.
I know. Oh, there.
There you go. Is
I
that
think
what
we
you're looking
did kill it. This was an awesome show.
Yeah, really.
Guys, we're out of here, but we're going to come back next week, same time, same place. It's our fond hope that you'll join us. And between now and then, don't do anything we wouldn't. That gives you a wide, wide berth.